Alin?
Ayan na, or live na ba?
Nasa YouTube na.
Live na ba?
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
Lilipat
Sige,
na.
after nito, pupunta na rin ako sa YouTube.
Parang hindi ko pa nakita sa YouTube.
Hindi ko pa nga rin wala pa nga. Kaya ba?
May
Ayun
delay
na.
comes
Ayan na, or live na ba?
Nasa YouTube.
Ay, na live na.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, good luck to everyone. And okay, sige, leave na muna ako dito. Hindi ako makalip.
Ayun na.
Ayan na, or live na ba? Shall we begin?
Okay, sige. Good morning and good
Sir Charles?
Okay. Success as a scientist is not simply a function of the quality of the ideas we hold in our hand or of the data we hold in our hands, but also of the language we use to describe them. We all understand that publish or perish is real, and it dominates our professional lives. But publish or perish is about surviving and not succeeding. And today we are going to hear more about stories on surviving one of the most important yet dreadful processes of getting a bachelor's degree, and that's writing your thesis. We have invited 4 fresh graduates from our program, and they will talk more about pushing the frontiers of landscape architecture research. Good morning to all our YouTube viewers and to those of you who joined us through Zoom. To introduce our 4 speakers, may we call on Professor Vic Delog. Professor Vic?
Yes, good morning. We will be having 4 speakers as Char mentioned. So our first speaker would be Stanley Don Baroga. He graduated only last year as from the University of the Philippines, College of Architecture. And his thesis is titled, wait, let me see. Wala. Ayan. Sorry about that. Okay. So, his thesis is titled Methodologies in the Identification, Analysis, and Measurement of Visual Pollution, the Case Studies of Intramuros. We've been discussing this early on, and I was asking Don if he will be discussing also extramuros, but he made mention that it will be only for intramuros. Okay. The said paper was, presented to the 5th International Symposium on Sustainable Landscape Development in IPB. This is University Bogor in Indonesia last September 2020. Okay. And this is under the poster category. Okay. Then our next speaker will be Joseph Dikit. No? Okay. So Joseph also graduated last year. Okay. Also BLA. Okay, and his thesis is titled Permaculture, no? Designing a sustainable and regenerative agricultural eco park through permaculture. Okay, and uh, Joseph is currently connected with the UP College of Architecture as a senior research assistant, and he's been working since January for the college, no? And we're doing the master plan of the complex of college. Okay, and our third speaker would be Edric Sia, and he also graduated last year. Okay, and the title of his thesis is GIS-based land suitability analysis for potential urban development sites in Difon, Quirino. Okay, and this thesis was also presented in the 5th International Symposium for Sustainable Landscape Development, also in IPB in University of Bogor, Indonesia. Okay, so and our last Our last presenter is uh, Tom, Tom Kirby Texon, uh, who also graduated last year and is currently connected with the Quezon City Hall Office of the City Mayor uh, under the Quezon Memorial Circle projects. Okay, and his thesis is somewhat research based also, and it's titled Substance Flow Analysis of Phosphorus in Quirino Province. No, so the uh, this paper was also presented internationally in the Fifth International Symposium for Sustainable Landscape Development. So all of the four theses was presented in an international audience. No, so these are what do you call this internationally renowned speaker, no? So for the third year, you are blessed and you have the opportunity to uh, so much pressure for the speaker. No, just relax, okay? So we without much further ado, let me give the floor again to Sir Char.
Thank you so much, Professor Vic. Since we have four presentations in line today, we will first go through all the 15-minute presentation and we will address your questions at the end. However, we encourage you to send in your questions to our Zoom chat panel or on YouTube comment section as we go along the presentations. We will not keep our viewers waiting. Without further ado, I give you our first speaker for today. Don, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Sir Charles. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So, good morning. My name is Sandy Don Baroga, and I will be presenting my thesis. In the recent decades, our country has entered an era of rapid urbanization, accompanied with the problem of not having a clear national landscape identity. This phenomenon filled cities with elements that do not. The landscape was proliferated with elements that one, do not relate to the place's character, two, do not resemble the place's history, and three, disrupt the views of the city by being unattractive or disjoint with other elements. This is what Portela, Jana, and De um, identified as visual pollution. This problem in the Philippine landscape has been evident that even lay people were able to identify which elements of the city were disjoint of its surroundings. In an effort to provide solutions to this increasingly recognizable problem, the Manila City Mayor proposed for various beautification projects in multiple parts of the city. Although this can be seen as a step towards the right direction, uh, as they have finally recognized the problem, the recent results appeared unable to address the root cause. Before providing solutions, a deep understanding of the problem should first be established. In my thesis entitled Methodologies in Identification, Analysis, and Measurement of Visual Pollution, focusing on Intramuros, Manila, we find the answer to the question, how can visual pollution be identified and measured? To be able to approach the problem of visual pollution, uh, Portela suggests that the visual landscape should be broken down into two dimensions, the non-affective and the affective. The non-affective dimension pertains to the physical features of a scene. This aspect is evident in Kevin Lynch's image of the city, wherein the relation of people to their environment is grounded to the physical elements of the city and the attributes of the environment. The complexity of these elements, their coherence with each other, their disturbance from specific elements, which we'll get to later on, and their imageability were used as indicators that describe the visual landscape. The indirect method of landscape evaluation was done to quantify this dimension of the visual landscape. To select a number of viewpoints that represented the diverse visual landscape of Intramuros, a viewpoint selection process through grid sampling was done. Each viewpoint is represented through a panorama from Google Maps. So here are the identified viewpoints. The landscape attribute inventory focused on breaking down the visual landscape into smaller, measurable components in order to create a quantitative estimate of the whole visual landscape. This study factored in the following indicators based on old, divide, and price study. So the first is complexity, which are the elements of the landscape um, identified and accounted. Present land covers were also identified. Two is disturbance. Disturbance, disturbing elements are defined as the elements that do not fit the aesthetic of the view and of the city as instituted in the Presidential Decree number 1616 implementing rules and regulations. So this law regulates the architectural style of Intramuros. So three, imageability, spectacular, unique, and iconic features in view, historical elements as defined by the Intramuros administration, and bodies of water are all factored in imageability. For naturalness, the percentage of the combined visual area of vegetation and bodies of water quantifies this indicator. 5. Visual scale, which is the number of 90-degree view sheds that extend up to 100 meters. And lastly, 6. Stewardship. This accounts for the perceived maintenance of the visual landscape using this criteria. The process of landscape coding was done to group visually similar viewpoints into codes and to conduct spatial analysis of the indicator scores. After having one representative viewpoint per landscape code, we now proceed to the measurement of the second dimension. So the affective dimension pertains to the intangible characteristics the physical elements elicit. This can refer to our memories, ideas, and opinions linked to the elements of the city. A visual landscape can be perceived as positive if it suggests fun, if it brings back happy memories, or sparks a creative idea, while it can be negative if it evokes fear or reminds sad experiences. This is where Berlin's theory of aesthetics come into play, which suggests that stimulus, which is in this case is visual landscape, is assessed through a survey of subjects to determine if they like the particular stimulus. The direct method of landscape evaluation was implemented for the measurement of this dimension. It aimed to factor in the variable of unique personal taste. This method involved a conduction of a survey of a sample and interview of two Intramuros administration division chiefs. The survey establishes three ratings for each viewpoint assessed in the survey. The beauty rating tells us if the viewpoint is beautiful. The interest rating shows if the viewpoint is interesting. And the image rating confirms if the viewpoint resembles um, their personal image of Intramuros. So the interviews was done to obtain information about the visual landscape and visual pollution in Intramuros that could not be reflected in the survey. So Architect Tibayan, division division chief of cultural heritage of Intramuros, and then urban planner Aliaga, division chief of urban planning in Intramuros administration were interviewed. The response ratings are later appended to the indicator scores to consolidate the visual quality value table for each viewpoint. Now that we have quantified the visual landscape, the results were analyzed to determine which factors indicated and heavily affected visual pollution. A correlation analysis was done to know which indicator scores and response ratings would cause lower beauty and interest ratings. Through this tool, the indicators disturbance, complexity, and stewardship were found out to have a larger effect on visual pollution. A higher disturbance causes a lower beauty and interest rating, while higher stewardship score causes an increase in the beauty rating. Through the correlation analysis, weights were assigned to each of the indicator scores and response ratings based on their effect to visual pollution. The weighted average of the values consolidates the measurement of the two dimensions of visual landscape into one, and ultimately quantifies the visual pollution of the viewpoint. So this is the visual pollution score formula. Disturbance, stewardship, and weighted image rating had the largest impact to visual pollution, which is reflected in the weights, followed by imageability. Other indicators that do not have a significant effect on visual pollution are not assigned any multiplier. Despite having a large effect, the indicator complexity is not factored in this visual pollution score formula, as the nature of its measurement could not imply that there is a maximum value. Higher average indicates a higher visual pollution score. So this is landscape code viewpoint 18, which had a visual pollution score of negative 9.474. So another correlation study was done to confirm the relationship uh, of the indicator scores and response ratings with the visual pollution score. The results verified that the visual pollution score had positive correlation with disturbance and a negative correlation with the beauty and interest rating. To determine the acceptable level of visual pollution, a linear regression analysis was done to where the response ratings were set to 50. The acceptable level of visual pollution is established at negative 38.009, which means that this is within the visual pollution uh, acceptable threshold. This viewpoint had the lowest visual pollution score within the viewpoints, while this is beyond acceptable visual pollution. So it can be concluded that through the direct and indirect method of landscape evaluation, landscape values can be obtained. These values can be used to measure the visual pollution score of the viewpoint. The acceptable visual pollution score can be derived through a linear regression analysis of the calculated visual pollution score. Through this, uh, the goal of identifying, analyzing, and measuring visual pollution in Intramuros has been realized. So that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you po.
That was one thesis, no? So we can, may we have an Joseph?
So, good morning, everyone. So, I hope you're all safe at home or wherever you are. So, good morning. So, I'm going to present to you my thesis titled Permaculture, Designing a Sustainable and Regenerative Agricultural Ecopark Through Permaculture. So, um, I'm going to present to you the posters I've presented during the 5th International Symposium of Sustainable Landscape Development in Indonesia. So, Quirino is known as the unexplored paradise of the North. It has a number of numerous beautiful and picturesque spots waiting to be seen and explored. So there's the Governor's Rapids, the Glipay Caves, the Madela Falls, and many, many more. However, this is also Quirino. So, So being a developing province susceptible to the effects of natural and man-made disasters, it is the best time for them to start implementing sustainable and regenerative solutions. It is to preserve and protect its natural and diverse beauty. And in my study, sustainability is defined as a holistic approach that takes into account environmental, social, and economic aspects in finding solutions to problems. And it is rooted in the idea that resources are finite. So, on the other hand, regenerative solutions or developments aim to close all the open loops that causes environmental damages and consequently direct these resources to places in the system where they can become valuable inputs. So, and this is where permaculture comes in. So, as defined by David Holmgren, permaculture is consciously designed landscapes which mimic the patterns and relationships found in nature, while yielding an abundance of food, fiber, and energy for provision of local needs. And to showcase its potential, the goal of the study is to integrate the permaculture principles in the landscape design of a sustainable and regenerative agricultural eco. To have a simple visualization of how I've done my study, here's my research design. So basically, I've started with problem setting and site selection to choose my thesis topic, and then came up with a research design and the theoretical frame and conceptual frameworks after looking for related studies and literatures. For the data gathering, I've gathered my qualitative data and quantitative data. Qualitative data were gathered through the rapid appraisal method or the rapid rural appraisal. So basically, it's a set of informal tools and techniques that are used to gather information in local situations. So the techniques that I used are key informant interview. So it's with the owners, organic agriculture practitioners and expert, the province tourism and agricultural office. I've also used direct observation and the transect walk techniques. For the quantitative data, I've used maps and plans provided by the owner and by the provincial government, at the same time census and statistics. For the site analysis, the first analysis tool that I've used is the Permaculture Design Decision Matrix. So this has 4 components, which I will be discussing later, which includes topography, sectors, zones, and the permaculture principles. So another side of my site analysis would be the qualitative analysis. So this includes the SWOT, which is the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then the market analysis, which basically assess how marketable your design or your the proposed design. So next would be design translation and then construction drawings, then the permaculture-based agricultural eco part. As you can see, my research design isn't really something that is unique. It basically follows the design process. However, what makes the research design unique is what is how you're going to do these methods. Like for example, the data gathering, the site analysis that would actually fit your research or uh, that would actually fit or your research and make it unique for your study. So for my study site, so my site is recommended by the local government of Torino. So it is a farm in Barangay Villa Pagaduan, Aglipay. So it is a 6-hectare, 2-year-old farm. And it has a hilly terrain that is slightly to moderate prone to erosion, and it is located in um, what is called the moist zone, which receives an average rainfall of 1,500 millimeters. And actually, the areas located in moist zones are agriculturally more productive than those in the dry zones. It is also covered with aluminous clay loam soil, which can constrain crop growth. So it is important that that the farmer knows the kind of soil that he has in his farm, so he knows that he needs to treat them before actually planting. Then the farm is also surrounded and mostly covered by agricultural and forest lands. Lastly, in terms of accessibility, it can only be accessed through a service or a farm-to-market route from the provincial. So given its relatively isolated location, the farm is also envisioned to be a haven for people who want a quiet place to relax and break away from their busy lives. And currently, it is an accredited learning site of the Agricultural Training Institute and has started transitioning to organic farming. So going to the site analysis, I've used the permaculture decision-making metric. So basically, it provides information on how elements should be related. So as stated by Andrew Millison, so it's where to place objects within the landscape and how to relate them to each other. So the first component is topography. So it tells how the water and shape behave in a specific environment and to be able to optimize the water as it moves to the site. So to analyze the topography of the site, I've created an hydrology analysis and slope analysis. So for the sectors, it pertains to all the forces that comes in from outside the site um, towards the site. So it is important so the landscape can be designed as a direct response to them. Next would be the zones. So it's based on the arrangement of elements on how near or far are these elements. And basically it tells how much time is needed during how much time is needed by the owner or to take care of them or basically in maintenance and management as well. With the principles, it provides the designer a guide on how different elements in the system would relate to each other. Okay, so the first one is the hydrology analysis. So basically, this shows that how the water moves in the site and to design according to it. So in the figure, the areas where the arrows meet, it's where rainwater collection or it's where most of the water meet, and it opens possibility for it to be reused and collected before going out of the system. It can also be where crops such as palay to be planted, since these kinds of crops need more irrigation than any other crops. So next would be the slope analysis. So this shows the different elevations in the site and their potential hazards and opportunities. So this shows that relatively areas can accommodate recreational and agricultural areas, while low areas can act as catch basins for rainwater, and relatively steeper areas can be planted with trees and crops for soil erosion control. And then lastly, the high areas can contain recreational activities that utilizes the view. So the next component would be the sectors. So the sectors that I've identified are the sand sector, the wind sector, the water, wildlife, landslide, and the view sector. And from these compass, most susceptible uh, the most susceptible part of the site would be the southwest part of the site, where most of the sectors comes in, especially those that related to landslide, to erosion, and flow of rainwater flow. So next would be the zoning. So zones are based on how near or far the elements are to the center of activity. So zone 0, so I have two zone zeros. So it's basically the center of activity. So why are there two zone zeros? Zones 0. So I've decided to create two zones 0 because these two areas have relatively different elevations, and it would be difficult to have only one zone 0 where um, because zone 0 are basically the ones that manages or that maintains the site. And if there's only 1 0 in this scenario, it would be very difficult and inefficient. So, and that's not the goal of the study. So next would be the zone 1. So these are areas that that you access most frequently. So this can include the kitchen gardens, animal houses, etc. Next would be zone 2. So still areas often accessed but less than zone 1. So this can include vegetables with long growing seasons, orchards, and others. So next is zone 3. So this is basically the farmland, the main crops, and the livestock, and it requires minimal maintenance and care once established. Next would be zone 4. So zone 4 is part wild and part managed. This is usually used for collecting wild foods, timber production, and source of animal forage and grazing. Lastly is the zone 5. So this is basically just the totally wild and unmanaged areas in the site. So last would be the permaculture principle. So what I've done is I've listed all the potential applications of the principles um, from the data collection itself, from the data collection step towards the until the management and maintenance of the farm. So we're now going to the design translation of all these analysis. So to help achieve the goal of the study, I've chose Sanglad as the design concept. So it means to anchor in Ilocano. So it aims to showcase how permaculture can create design that symbiotically integrate people in nature, synergistically connect all elements, and harmoniously incorporate different functions. And to help solidify or to 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 put this concept into the design, I've also I also chose a thematic concept or a design theme which is vernacular. So it uses locally available materials and knowledge in building structures and creating spaces. So as for my design, I've used bamboo as the primary construction material for the eco park, and the plants are native and multifunctional. So next would be the form concept. So the form concept used is roots. So the design used these roots characteristics in the design. So the hierarchy for effective and efficient circulation, connectivity for integration of areas, and the organic shape for space optimization and preservation of rurality. So we're now going to the landscape design. So um, my proposed design is divided into three major areas. So the lower area, hilltop area, and the upper area. The lower area, these has the lowest elevation, where most of the accommodation features can be found, including the entrance, dormitory, restaurant, the administration, and the training hall. And since it is the lowest area, most of the water features found in this area also serve as a rainwater catchment and source of irrigation. So, for example, is the pool area, the aquaculture pond, and the boating pond. So next would be the hilltop area. So this one has the highest elevation. However, it has a limited flat land. So it primarily functions for recreation. So this includes the camping area, the viewing area, and the cottages. Wind turbines were also placed in this area to utilize the elevation. So lastly, the upper area has an elevation between lower and hilltop area. So it's where most of the agricultural features can be found. So it includes the agrochemical plant, the greenhouse, the farmer's market, permaculture garden, and the duck pond. So in addition to these major areas, the design also have the croplands and the buffer area. So the croplands are the main source of income for the agricultural eco park. It also applies different organic farming techniques such as natural farming inputs and intercropping practices. So this is to increase crop resiliency, soil productivity, and erosion control. And lastly is the buffer area, which serves mainly as the eco park's barrier, which aids in controlling erosion and water flow. So this includes the tree orchard, the food forest, the bamboo forest, and the unmanaged forest. So to fully understand my site development plan, I've created um, uh, mini plans that targets a certain feature of the site. So this one is for circulation. So most of the paths that I've created follows the contour of the farm. So it basically follows the principle of designing from pattern to detail. And then on the upper area, there's a circular path, the blue one. So it is a one-way ATV trail, and it is chosen based on the topography, the view, and the user experience that it can provide. And lastly, the green path. So as you can see, it more or less creates a rectangular shape, and this is to increase field efficiency and lessen inefficiency costs. So next is the accessibility plan. So this one shows which area are publicly available, which ones are semi-private, and lastly, which ones are private. So as from the figure, you can see that most of the areas are publicly accessible. Uh, these public areas do not require you to have entrance fees. So how is the farm going to be economically sustainable? It's by the services that's going to be provided by the farm. So even though you can enter the farm without entrance fee, you can only avail the services provided by the farm. For example, the restaurants. For example, you want to fish feed or you want to boat by paying for them. So that's how the farm is going to remain profitable. And actually, it is modeled after the Yamang Bukid Farm in Puerto Princesa, Palawan, which actually follows the same kind of accessibility. So next would be classification plan. So this one classifies the site, whether they're for agricultural areas, so for crop and livestock production, educational areas to teach and train people, and recreational areas that improve people's social and mental health. So since agricultural production is the park's primary function and income source, this basically occupies the 75% of the eco park. And at the same time, you can see that most of the areas fall under two or more classifications. And this is aligned to the permaculture principle of integrating rather than segregating. So lastly is the SURE plan, or basically it shows which areas are for sustaining and regenerating. So um, most areas in the eco park both function to sustain and to regenerate. So uh, these areas mostly composed of agricultural spaces. So being they are the primary producers and the users of waste. And also these areas sustain the farm economically for its agricultural production and environmentally for practices that preserve soil quality. In addition to this, the Eco Park also promotes social sustainability by providing jobs to the people of Carino, resulting in a healthier and more equitable community. And then also being a province that primarily generates income from the agriculture and tourism industry. It's the people that have more, its people have more experience to these areas, thus cultivating a culture of sharing among them. And at the same time, it offers local and international guests space where they can relax mentally and physically by interacting with other people and with nature. So with the incorporation of these elements, a closed loop system was developed for the agricultural eco park, where wastes are reused and renewable sources of energy are harnessed. In a closed loop system, the development would be able to generate profit from less cost while preserving and improving land productivity for a long period of time. The agricultural ecopark proved that by imitating the Earth's natural processes and relationships, permaculture can create sustainable and regenerative developments that could preserve and enhance the natural environment. And that's my thesis titled Permaculture, Designing a Sustainable and Regenerative Agriculture. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank, thank you so much, Joseph. With what's happening right now, I believe your permaculture farm is indeed ideal for a quick getaway for all of us. May we call on our third speaker, Stanley? The screen is yours.
Cedric. It's Cedric.
Yes.
It's
Hello?
Edric Sia. The third speaker is Edric. Go ahead, Edric.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Uh, it's a blank screen.
Oh. Oh,
Not
yes.
yet. Uh-huh.
Okay, so hold on. Okay, so right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Edric Sia, and I will be presenting my study entitled GIS-based land suitability analysis for potential urban development sites in Difun, Quirino. I have an untitled. But anyway, as the title suggests, the goal of this study was to create a suitability map that determines the most suitable areas for urban development based on several factors, which we'll tackle later on. Now, before I proceed with the study, I would just like to give a little context. Population growth has always brought about the development of built up areas, and in many developing countries like the Philippines, urbanization is usually seen as an indicator of economic growth. However, unmanaged expansion or urban sprawl can result to the rapid loss of agricultural land and even damage to natural areas. Urbanization as a phenomenon has to be managed through appropriate analysis and proper planning. Now, think of a place wherein developments are all over the place, structures are built on hazard prone areas. Well, I can imagine it might look like a mess down there, but if you're like me, then you might also think of something like Metro Manila. Well, if not only for the opportunities present in the metropolis, I think a lot of people would agree that Metro Manila isn't an ideal place to live in. It's very chaotic. It lacks green spaces like parks. Well, there are also some golf courses here and there, which are mostly catered for rich people. But the point is, it's not nice to live here. And with that, we have to learn from our mistakes. So let's see if there's a place which shows a lot of potential and okay, here we are, Quirino province. But let's try to zoom in a little more to the municipality of Difun. Now, Difun is considered as one of the main business areas of the province, but despite this, most of its land area is used for agriculture. And there are also a number of ecotourism sites in the municipality, just like Ganano Falls, as shown here. Now, Difun is also known as the gateway to Quirino province, as you have to pass through the municipality in order to enter the province. And because it is near Santiago City, located here, population is expected to surge into the municipality, stimulating urban development. And if urbanization is not properly managed, it could impede the progress of the municipality in achieving its long-term vision of being a prime agro-ecotourism center in the province. Now, with this research, it could help the local government in formulating their upcoming land use plans so that they could steer their decisions to the right direction. Now we will proceed to the study, and here are the main parts which we will go through one by one. Let's start with the workflow. So to do the land suitability analysis, two GIS methods were utilized, namely Boolean overlay and weighted overlay. And the results of these methods will then be combined to create the final suitability map. So why do we need to combine these methods, these maps? Can't we just use one? Well, you could, but it's because of something that we will talk about later. So for now, let's just proceed to the data that were used in order to perform the analysis. The majority of these files, as you can see, were from CFFQI, Community Forestry Foundation, Quirino, a foundation that is under the provincial government. And these were then pre-processed to make them useful for the analysis. Now let's look at Boolean overlay. Boolean overlay is a type of suitability analysis that uses only the truth values, true or false, or they are represented as 1 and 0 respectively. Now, in this study, this method was used to create a restriction map wherein areas that are barred from being developed are determined. So thematic maps were classified as either 1 or 0, with 1 being available for development and 0 for restricted areas. The values given to these maps were gathered from existing literature and Philippine laws. Now, for example, here, this one for slope, well, according to the revised Forestry Code of the Philippines, PD 705, any land with a slope of 18 and above should not be classified as A and D or alienable and disposable, and that's why here it is restricted. Now, for weighted overlay, another set of thematic maps were reclassified from 1 to 10 to represent their suitability, level of suitability, with 10 being the most suitable. The scores were based on other literature and observations of the site. Now let's try to look at these reclassified maps one by one. Here, lower values were given to areas near ecotourism sites as urban development could negatively affect the environment of the site. Now, for elevation, areas with lower elevation are more vulnerable to flooding. Thus, a lower suitability score was assigned to these areas. And those located in the higher elevations were also given low suitability scores as they are more prone to erosion and are mostly located in protected forestlands. For existing built-up spaces, they are automatically considered as least suitable for development as they are already developed. And forest lands were also given low suitability scores for environmental protection. Agricultural lands were only given a moderate score, even though they are considered suitable for development because aside from ensuring food security, maintaining agricultural lands also preserves the agricultural character of the municipality. And this is what they want. So other areas such as bare land and grassland were given higher suitability scores. Accessibility is important in developing urban sites, thus higher values were given to areas near existing barangay roads, as seen here. Meanwhile, areas that are very near national roads were given moderate suitability values, excuse me, to avoid congestion along the main thoroughfares of the municipality. And as most utilities and services are still located in the poblacion or the town center, accessibility to the town center is also important when locating suitable expansion sites because areas that are near to the town center were and because of this, areas that are nearer to the town center were given higher suitability scores than those located further away. Now, to avoid encroachment of urban development to prime agricultural land, mm, areas near them were given low values, and the farther away, the higher the suitability score is. Gentle slopes are better for urban development as steep slopes could not only increase building costs, but also could pose higher risks of erosion. And as stated in the law, areas that have slopes of 18 and above are automatically considered unsuitable for urban development. Lastly, water is important to everyone, and towns usually develop near bodies of water. However, it is also important to designate ecological buffers along the waterways to preserve water quality and to avoid negative environmental impacts to the site. Now, areas that are located within the buffer zone were considered least suitable for development, as seen here. But at the same time, areas that are not so far away were assigned higher values. The weighted overlay method gives each thematic layer a weight, which represents their relative importance. And these were calculated using a pairwise matrix, as seen here. Originally, the plan was to gather inputs from government officials, urban planners, and locals through questionnaires and field interviews. However, due to the coronavirus situation and the lockdowns imposed in the country during the time this study was undertaken, it was difficult to establish proper communication with the stakeholders. Thus, the study relied on DIFUN's existing conditions, the vision of the municipality, and also related literature. And as you can see, priority was given to the preservation of ecotourism sites and prime agricultural land, which is a reflection of the municipality's vision. Now here we see the result of the Boolean overlay method. And according to the output, around 87% of the municipality's land area is restricted for development, leaving only 13% available for possible expansion. Now, most of the areas available for development are on the eastern side of the municipality, located near the poblacion. These areas have a slope of not more than 18%, which also makes them suitable for paddy fields. Hence, most of the available areas for development seen in the restriction map are adjacent to prime agricultural lands. Now, for the weighted overlay output, as you can see, it is very different from the restriction map or the Boolean overlay output. The suitability scale of 1 to 10 was simplified and categorized into 5 classes from least to most suitable. And according to this, suitable areas only occupy 8.09% of the municipality and are located near the western side of Difun. And these areas are mostly located in the barangays of Pimentel and Magsaysay. Now, to answer the question earlier, why use 2 methods? Why not use only one? Well, you could, just like what I've said, but as you've seen in my previous slides, these 2 methods have vastly different results. So by combining both of these methods, you'll get a more narrowed down suitability map. So here, it shows the difference between the results of the 2 methods. So after combining both maps, areas that are not suitable for development were greatly diminished and now only consists of around 0.32% of the total land area of the municipality. Barangay Magsaysay has the largest area in the municipality that is most suitable for urban development. However, the area covered by these suitable sites are small relative to the size of the entire municipality. So why do we need to do land suitability analysis for urban developments? Well, just like in doing designs in landscape architecture, we do analysis to further understand the site. So proper analysis for planning and enforcement must be done in order to avoid development that could negatively affect the environment and its inhabitants. And to recap the things that were discussed, using both Boolean and weighted overlay methods could provide more information about the suitability levels of each area. And a total of 18 factors and restrictions were identified, and it was found out that only 0.32% of the total land area of the municipality is most suitable for development. Now, as the dynamics of development is much more complex, the study should not be treated as the sole basis for planning, but nevertheless, the study can still be a guide for the local government units in carrying out future studies or analyses. Now, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Edric. Technologies such as GIS really play a vital role in moving research in landscape architecture forward. Tom, I believe you are our last speaker. You may now share your screen. Tom? All right, there we go.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. I am Tom Kirby Texon, and I will be presenting my thesis towards sustainable and regenerative territories, ecological restructuring of phosphorus retention and mobilization based on substance flow analysis in Quirino Province. Before First of all, I would like to say that this presentation focuses more on the data, on the results and discussion, synthesis, and conclusion. But to provide some context, the current global output for agricultural or food production is very dependent on phosphorus fertilizers, PR for short. And research shows that within the lifetime, 70 to 140 years, the global reserves of phosphorus rocks will run out. And phosphorus, when mishandled, It can result in over-enrichment of water environments, leading to red tide and eutrophication. So sustainable management of phosphorus resource is important. And in order to assess how efficient the current phosphorus circulation is, flow analysis have proven to be a valuable tool. The goal of this study is to investigate the flow of phosphorus that enter, transform, pass through, and leave the territorial subsystems within Quirino province that will foster the transition of rural and peri-urban areas from linear metabolism to circular metabolism, thereby aiding in the development of sectoral plan for agriculture. The theoretical basis for this research are the following. First is the circular economy, which is defined by the World Economic Forum as industrial system that is restorative or regenerative by intention and design, which means it is a closed-loop design, whereas the outputs, the waste and the outputs of a system will be recycled, recovered, and be used as regenerative products. Second theory is the industrial ecology by Lifset and Gradel, which means it is the study of flows of materials and energy in industrial and consumer activities. It analyze it. This theory provides context that the flow of materials tells us about the economic and political aspect of how we produce and consume things. Lastly is the metabolism, urban metabolism. According to urban metabolism, any territory can be treated as a super organism, whereas the resource flows flowing in, flowing out, or transform can be studied. And all the aspects, such as social, economic, political, territorial, ecological, and waste, are some of the challenges that alter this consumption production patterns. So the general methodology of this research consists of these four steps. First one is the process analysis by providing theoretical basis, the theoretical framework of analyzing the phosphorus circulation in Quirino province. Second is the accounting and assessment, which means it is the rigorous data collection of um, values that represents that phosphorus circulation within the study site. Third is the simulation model, which represents the construction of the research model needed for this thesis. And lastly, through landscape architecture, what are the landscape architectural interventions that can optimize and regulate the phosphorus circulation within Quirino province? So first part, results and discussion. The site, the territorial system that we are investigating is the whole province of Quirino. As you can see, it is predominantly forested area, and it consists of closed forest, broadleaf tropical forest, followed by wooded lands, and it is predominantly agricultural. So the theoretical basis for conducting this research and the theoretical framework of showing the phosphorus circulation in the province is shown in the screen. So this dotted line represents the borders of the Quirino. Outside of this box is the other provinces. Within this box is the Quirino province. It is divided into some sectors and components. The natural, the forested, agricultural sector, retailing sector, anthropogenic consumption sector, and lastly, the waste and wastewater sector. In this study, rigorous, as I said a while ago, rigorous data collection was performed. And there are indicators used to measure phosphorus circulation in the province. So there are parameters and coefficients. These parameters are the values that are gathered by government statistics offices such as the Quirino government, the Philippine Statistics Authority, yes, PSA, Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations and International Rice Research Institute. And the material mass flows datasets were called in under the umbrella term parameters, and the coefficients, on the other hand, represents the concentration of phosphorus per material. So just a quick run through of what are these datasets. So here are some of the datasets considered in this thesis. All in all, there are 262 parameters and 125 coefficients utilized in the study, and these are utilized by these equations, 83 flow equations that characterize the movement of phosphorus within Quirino province. So parameters plus coefficients and utilized by the flow equations, and this theoretical phosphorus circulation in province, we will get this, the actual simulation model, the research model that represents the phosphorus flowing in the Quirino province. So the forestry, agriculture, retailing, anthropogenic consumption sector, subsystem, and the waste and wastewater subsystem. Each arrow represents the phosphorus flow equation, and there are 83 flows in this simulation model, and each arrow, the width of each arrow represents the magnitude of each flow. So the beauty of conducting this type of research is you can study, you can create, you can investigate the territorial system as a system, and you can investigate its components as a standalone. For this study, I also investigate the subsystems. First is the forestry, agriculture subsystem, retailing, anthropogenic consumption subsystem, and lastly, the waste and wastewater subsystem. So firstly, the forestry subsystem. So the biggest flow in this subsystem is the forestry uptake, which is represented by the equation F24, and the forest residues F27 is this. When we blow up this Sankey model, we will get this, a blow-up model of that simulation model that represents the forestry subsystem. As you can see, the bulk of phosphorus coming out of this subsystem is characterized by this erosion and runoff from grasslands. The bulk of circulating within the subsystem is represented by these two equations, the forest uptake and the forest residues. Moving forward, the agriculture subsystem. In this subsystem, the major flows are the erosion and runoff of croplands to surface waters, and the cropland, the crop production. So just another blow up of the simulation model. This time it focuses more on the agriculture subsystem. The bulk of the outflows, flows exiting the subsystem, consist of the erosion and runoff from croplands, followed by nutrient leaching. And the bulk of phosphorus entering the subsystem is the mineral fertilizer consumption and the feeds used in livestock production. But within the subsystem, it is evident that the bulk of phosphorus circulating is happening from the cropland, the crops rather, to crop residues, meaning there is an accumulation and generation of phosphorus-rich crop residues. And there's also generation of livestock manure over time, which is represented by these delta values. Moving forward to retailing subsystem, the retailing acts as the distributor of goods and materials within the Quirino province. So it holds almost zero value because all the materials, in this case phosphorus, entering is also exiting in its subsystem. The fourth subsystem is the anthropogenic consumption subsystem, which consists of the population, both rural and urban population, and the built-up areas. This subsystem, the flows which accounts most are the F72, 73, 77, 78. These are the human excreta and wastewater generation from the rural and the urban population. They consist of the 20.43% of the total outflows. Lastly, the waste and wastewater subsystem. Compared with the other subsystems, this subsystem is constantly generating phosphorus, meaning there's there's phosphorus entering in the subsystem, but there's zero to little exiting the subsystem. So the phosphorus is stuck within the subsystem. The biggest contributor inflow for this subsystem are the human excreta generated from rural and urban population. So in a quick analysis, the research findings validated most of the initial hypotheses that the agriculture is a major contributor to the mismanagement of phosphorus in Quirino. Shown in the screen are the top 20 biggest flows in the province of Quirino. If you will notice, the the biggest flows were from the forestry subsystem because forest subsystem was inherently a natural recycler, and from the land cover map, it is the biggest area in terms of it is the biggest land cover component in the land cover map, the forest subsystem. If you're going to compare the total inflows, outflows, and the change in inflows, outflows, and the ratio, waste and wastewater had the most propensity to accumulate phosphorus over time due to high inflow-outflow ratio, because there's little exiting the subsystem. There's more inflow than outflow, so there's a positive delta value, which translates to accumulation over time. On the other hand of the spectrum, the forestry, there's higher value for outflows than inflows, so it is generally negative delta value. So the following the following data from these land covers were translated into maps. So there are phosphorus input maps, output maps, and phosphorus balance map. So recall that this is the land cover map of the province of Quirino as of 2018. The phosphorus input map would be this, the output map would be this, and the phosphorus balance map is this. It translates that forestry represents a negative balance over 2018. The next aspect of this study is the analysis of different indicators of inflows and outflows. So for this study, the term phosphorus retention refers to the ability of a particular subsystem or actor to continue to hold and to absorb available phosphorus in the possession for a period of time. So for this study, the delta value represents the retention. It translates to the retention of phosphorus in Quirino province. So the most negative is the forestry because it's actually losing. The most negative value is the phosphorus retention of forestry. And the most positive value is the waste and wastewater because it is accumulating over time. For the land cover, for the phosphorus mobilization in general, erosion and runoff, and nutrient leaching and subsurface runoff are the top two mobilization flows that is happening for forestry, agriculture, anthropogenic consumption. Here is the estimated erosion and leaching values for the province of Quirino. To sum up, sorry. Wait lang. Sorry. Error. Here is a comparison made between the study site, the Quirino province, and the study site of the related literature reviewed. Um, technical difficulties. Sorry. Okay, the study will only make sense if the data is benchmarked to other studies reviewed. So as you can see, the Quirino province has a negative phosphorus retention in terms of kilogram per hectare per year, which is similar to the case of Berlin, Brandenburg, Germany. The context, the reason behind it is translated into these units, kilogram per hectare per year, because we want to raise a more objective point of comparison, because these sites do not share the same geographical scale. In terms of scale, China has the largest area, and France has the least amount of the area. So in order to establish a more objective point of comparison, we are translating into the magnitude per hectare per year. And the phosphorus retention for Quirino relative to the other study sites is mostly negative. And it translates to higher usage efficiency because you are applying less fertilizer, but you are producing more agricultural products using least amount of phosphorus. It might be an indication of a high usage efficiency, but it can be translated into a negative accumulation. It may be a product of, it might be an indication that there's a generous application of phosphorus in the past, but now you are now experiencing depletion of phosphorus because you are generally putting little to no phosphorus enrichment to your soil, but you are producing higher amount of values of goods which are phosphorus rich. So for the proposed measure, here is a tabulation of landscape architectural interventions that can be made to improve the retention, remobilization, resource efficiency, and recycling of phosphorus in the Quirino. So there are different approach, but there are different approach for each land areas, which is shown in the screen. And the proposal is to improve the recycling of waste and wastewater to negate the effects of too much erosion happening in the croplands and grasslands, and to increase the retention capacity of phosphorus within these production areas, the croplands and grasslands, and to recover and reuse and to upcycle the byproducts in crop residues and animal manure. So the goal is to minimize these thick arrows that represents leaching and erosion, increase the volume of arrows that represents upcycling, upcycling and recovery of waste. Using these typologies, so to sum up, the different proposed landscape architectural and practical approach in dealing with the improvement of phosphorus metabolism in Quirino province, shown beside is a visualization of measures in their respective functions in relation to their metabolic actor. So if these typologies were implemented, the SFA will be rewired as illustrated by the bright arrows. So here's a hypothetical 1 hectare plain cropland. And these are the proposed landscape architectural interventions. So in 10 years after the implementation, there will be a vibrant hedgerows, shelter belt windbreaker, a bioremediation pond that which phytoremediates surface runoffs infused with phosphate-based fertilizers, aquaponics to improve recycling of phosphorus through and using diluted sludge as growth fertilizer, mushroom and biochar production area, which utilizes the excessive generation of crop residues, composting facilities, again, for the crop residues or the post-harvest residues. For a typical 1 hectare livestock farm, this would be the 10-year maturation. It incorporates, again, the technology of windbreakers, aquaponics, composting facility, but this time, there's a proposal to create some area wherein the waste, the livestock manure are filtered and the phosphorus embedded in those manure in manure will be recycled and recovered to be able to produce some feeds for the aquaponics. Yeah. Next is a typology that involves a typical sloping cropland with 10 to 45% slope. The technologies that will be employed are agroforestry, contour hedgerows, stone line. Lastly, a typical sloping cropland with 10 to 45% slope. Same story, that the proposed technologies that will improve the retention in this typical sloping cropland are the following: trash line, fodder bank, stone line, and hedgerows. Conclusion, the current agriculture subsystem of Quirino province is producing negative environmental impact on its surface and groundwaters, as evident in the high values of surface runoffs and leaching. Number two, there is a significant deficit in the croplands and grasses and other woodlands due to high and serious land degradation. Three, there is an accumulation of phosphorus in waste and wastewater management subsystem because of the absence of a physical WWTP in the province. And lastly, culminating through the P-inventory analysis, this study presented unlimited landscape architectural solutions to some agricultural landscape typologies in an effort to provide a template in transitioning the current linear P metabolism to a circular one, a closed-loop design one. Some of my recommendations is first is the use of GIS to improve the overall translation of numbers into maps. Second is a more stratified and more localized data gathering. And lastly, the uncertainties, assumptions, and limitations could be further elaborated. Thank you. That's it all.
Thank you, guys. No? Uh, well, this is some kind of an overwhelming information for our third year students. No? Okay, Sir Char. Is Sir Charles still here? Nawala yata si Sir Charles. Hello? Sir Char?
Yes, I'm here.
Sorry. Ako
Can,
yata nawala. Sorry.
can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
here.
yes, yes.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you so much, Tom, for that insightful research on flow analysis that perhaps our current thesis students and those who will journey their mini thesis this semester may use in their study. And thank you so much to all of our presenters. We have indeed witnessed a diverse set of topics from research to planning to design. Our speaker once again showcased their ability not just to perform a sound research, but also to communicate their ideas and results effectively. They have shown that simply following the rule to learn X, we did Y was not always the case. Our speakers have come full circle to make their thesis happen, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Again, our Zoom chat panel and YouTube comment sections are open for your questions and comments. Kindly include the name of the presenter you wish to answer your questions. Um, all right, our first question would be a question for all of you. How did you come up with your topic? Was there a list before the final title? Or what was the process in pinning down your topic? All of you may answer the question.
Hello, and okay, thank you for the question. So I'll probably go first. So in our case, we were already told that our site would actually be like our mini thesis would revolve around like Quirino. So we focuses our topics on basically the topics revolve around Quirino being a rural area or whatever that is probably connected to it. So in my case, permaculture, I actually, since Quirino is both, their vision is to be a prime agro-industrial area or a province. Mine, I focuses my research on like how I can help improve these industries, like for example the agricultural, the tourism, and that's where I've came across this the concept of permaculture, and it's like it's something new for me because I haven't really heard it, and then when I read about it more, and then I'm just like, how can something like this, like with all these promises, how can people like not, how can these be something not really known by people? So that's how I decided on my topic.
All right, thanks, Joseph. Edric, do you want to answer this?
Actually yung topic ko kasi, masalimuot yung proseso kasi yung sa batch namin, yung topics usually nanggaling sa mini thesis tapos tinuloy lang sa fourth year. Pero sa case ko kasi, umulit ako. So, iba yung topic ko nung first sem sa fourth year, sa topic ko nung mini thesis, tas yung topic ko ngayong final. netong second sem. So, siguro sa pagpili lang nung topic, kasi yun nga, yung Kirino kasi binigay na siya sa amin. So, hindi ko sure sa iba, pero more like nag-isip na lang ng parang ano ba yung pwedeng i-solve, ano ba yung mga problema, ano ba yung mga katanungan na meron kami about sa province, and paano din namin mako-connect yung kunyari, kung ako sa case ko, ang ginawa namin nung mini thesis, parang yung batch kasi namin puro shifty. So, ako, si Jody, tsaka si galing sa Econ. So, nung mini thesis ko, kinonect ko siya sa economics. So, then dun na nag-develop, parang tanong ka lang ng tanong sa sarili mo hanggang sa marating mo yung, okay, ito na yung gusto kong sagutin na katanungan. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yes, Stanley, do you want to answer the question?
All right. So, unlike my thesis mates, yung iba katulad ko rin, pero hindi ko tinuloy yung mini thesis ko to my thesis. Yung topic selection, mostly kasi, I guess this also answers Miss Jocelle's question na merong general, I guess parang matagal ko nang wina-wonder na bakit yung billboards dito sa Philippines ay visual blight. Pero pag in-attribute natin to like New York or Japan, iconic siya, or like in a sense part siya ng kanilang visual identity, landscape identity. So mas nag-revolve around dun yung question ko na bakit itong billboard or itong signages ay visual blight dito sa Philippines, and then it went on ano nga ba yung visual blight, ano yung visual pollution, ayun. So mostly doon siya nag-revolve.
All right. Lastly, Tom.
Yung study ko, di ba, about phosphorus and phosphorus metabolism. Actually, nagkaroon lang ako ng idea niyan dahil sa algorithm ng Science Direct. Ang nangyari kasi dyan, during parang may class si Professor Villawan about hardscapes or utilities. Then, na-mention niya yung mga standards ng curb and gutter. Tapos sabi niya dati, sa future, na-visualize niya na wala ng curb and gutter. Ano na lang, planting. Yun na lang yung buffer between pedestrians tapos yung mga cars. Then yung planting na yun, nakalubog. So, naka-capture niya yung runoff. And yung plants na nakatanim doon are phytoremediation plants. And they are capable of sequestering, capturing yung mga carbon and other pollutants. So, nung nag-iisip ako ng mini thesis, inisip ko yun. Tapos, nag-search ako sa Science Direct. Then, nagbasa about carbon sequestration, carbon capture. Tapos, napunta ako sa carbon metabolism. Then, sabi ng algorithm ng Science Direct, punta ka naman yun sa urban metabolism. Then, yun, pinopose ko yun kay Professor Napi Navarra, yun yung mini thesis advisor ko, about urban metabolism yung magiging topic ng thesis ko. Then, pinapili niya ako ng element. Pero actually, parang siya na yung nag-suggest na phosphorus na lang kasi yun yung parang kaunti pa lang yung study. So yun, from design lang ng streetscapes, carbon sequestration and carbon capture, carbon metabolism, urban metabolism, yun, naging phosphorus metabolism. So dun yung story ng topic ko. Pero actually, namili pa ako ng iba. Pero yun yung pinaka-storya.
All right, thank you, Tom. Like what I said earlier, you have come full circle to make things happen. All the hot questions are coming in, but we may ask one or two from you so that we could all accommodate the questions of our students. Hold on. All right. We have a comment and a question from one of our students. Thank you for your insightful and inspiring presentations. I would like to ask, how did you discover sources for your papers? Considering our current situation, can you recommend strategies in looking for information materials that we can use for our mini thesis.
Oh, sige, sagutin ko. Yung sa akin kasi,
All right.
more on secondary data research. So, nag-base ako dun sa mga knowledge base, knowledge bank. If sisipagan kang mag-Google, more than advanced Google research, may makikita kang website ng Philippine Statistics Authority, naka-publish lahat ng production, consumption, lahat ng mga data sa Philippines. Meron yan, website ng Philippine Statistics Authority. Tapos number 2, ako sa Agriculture, Food and Agricultural Organization ng United Nations. Naka-publish rin lahat ng data nila. Mula 1990s hanggang ngayon, ang dami nila naka-publish. So, ang gusto ko lang sabihin is, pakinabangan nyo yung mga knowledge bank na readily available naman sa internet. Hindi mo na kailangan gumawa doon ng data request, hindi mo na kailangan mag-sign in or gumawa pa ng recommendation letter from your thesis advisors. Mag-extra effort ka lang sa paghahanap ng mga knowledge banks na libre and educational. Yun. So, yun yung may-recommend ko. Kahit hindi ka nag-on-site sa naka-base ka digitally, may internet ka, go. Meron ka na agad data.
All right, thanks, Tom. Perhaps another answer from you guys?
Hello? Siguro
Yes, Stan.
sagutin ko rin yung tanong. Mostly kasi in my case, hindi ganun ka hard yung data na ginagather ko since ang kailangan ko ay photos, more on ganun. And then, mas research-based. So, yung approach ko dito was, mainly to look for papers published online. Alam ko yung may access tayo sa Elsevier na pwede natin gamitin to access international papers. Tapos from doon, meron din kasing actually yung paper is already published data, so pwede rin siya gamitin in your thesis, ganun. So mostly ayun, naghanap ako ng similar studies, and then doon na nag-branch out na doon yung methodology and then yung data na nakuha ko. So ayun, yun yung sources mostly.
All right, thank you, Stanley. Also, writing a mini thesis or a thesis is also a test of how proactive you are as a student. How do you maximize the resources that are available to you and your ability to think across disciplines and, eventually make things happen? We have another question from our third-year student. Hello, this question is again for everyone, but one or two from you may answer. Did you have a general problem that you wanted to solve before you picked a site? Or is your thesis topic tailored to the problem that your site specifically poses? Thank you. Perhaps we may ask Joseph and Edric to answer.
Well, ayun nga, sa akin, depende siya doon sa site kasi nabanggit din sa akin ng Quirino na naghanap sila ng parang areas parang kinoconsider nila yung expansion, pero sa labas ng municipality. So parang, okay, pwede kong gawin tong topic na to for the thesis. So nakabase siya dun sa site since given na naman siya sa amin.
So for my case, I went to Quirino na parang my thesis parang parang applying in permaculture, more on like planning of a barangay, parang it's more of a larger scale. But then Quirino has like a list of proposed sites that they wanted to develop, like to prioritize to develop, and that's how parang it adjusted, parang ganun, parang my topic adjusted to the site. So that's how it became parang lumiit yung scale to a farm than to like the original plan.
All right, we have already talked about tailoring the research problem that you want to tackle for your research and what inspires you to do so. All right, do you want to answer that, Tom? Okay, go ahead.
Yung kanina, sorry gusto ko lang dagdagan. Yung advice, yung piece of advice kasi ni Dr. Napi sa amin, yung about sa problem and site, unahin mo muna yung problem before yung site. Para yung ina-atake mong problem is merong universality, mas universal yung problem. So mas malakas yung thesis po kasi hindi lang siya dependent sa site. Yun lang. Yun yung gusto ko lang i-add. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. That's a very nice piece of advice. So after the research problem was laid out, the next question would be the research approach to be used to generate the data that you needed. With the diversity of methods and research approach that a student may use, how did you narrow down the research approach and the methods for a specific study? Any of you may answer the question.
Okay, for me, in terms of research methods, it's all about that's why the related literature is really important, because that's how you'll really see how different researches were made, like how they came up with this study, how they were able to produce these results, and that's how you'll come up with your own research design. Like you get a piece of this from this research, a piece from this part, and in my case, I got some from studies, and then I got some which is like the permaculture decision making matrix. I got that from an online permaculture online course from Oregon State University. So yun. So it's about like parang pagpapatsi-patsi, no, from different studies and sources to make it your own.
Yeah, we all have our own individual and personal stories to tell. We have another question from Zoom.
Hello. Sorry, add ko
Oh,
lang
yes,
doon sa
Stanley.
sinabi ni
Sure.
Joseph na I think the key here is to understand yung problem at kung paano siya ano yung relationship niya with paano ba? Ano yung understanding ng problem at saka yung framework niya. So dito pumapasok yung theories. Like ano yung nagko-constitute ng problem. Tapos from then on, saka natin ma-identify kung paano natin siya isosolve one by one para magkaroon ng holistic approach dun sa method. Ayun.
All right. Thank you, Stanley. This is, again, a question for all of you. Did data and resource availability, especially in the online setup, greatly influence your topic selection in your thesis? If so, what limitations did you experience regarding this? Tom, do you want to answer this?
Okay, so ako na.
All right, Edward. Okay, sure.
Kasi ako yung nagpalit ng topic nung nitong second sem. So delikado kasi tapos yun din yung tawag dito. Syempre doon din nag-start yung pandemic. So 'di ba, parang hirap bumalik sa. Pero yung sa resource availability, actually siya yung factor kung bakit ako nagpalit ng topic. Kaya naiba yung topic ko nung first sem. Kasi yung topic ko actually nung first sem is parang yung urban development simulation. So masisimulate mo yung urban growth ng municipality para alam mo yung direction na patutunguhan mo. So medyo related pa rin siya dun sa ginawa kong topic. Iba lang yung approach. And tip din pala, kung kunyari may nakita kayong paper na na hindi available sa, kunyari kahit sa alternative sources, kontakin nyo yung author. So, totoo yung nasa Facebook, yung kontakin mo yung author, tapos they'll be happy to share it with you. So, nagkataon, di na desperado na ako doon sa first sem topic ko kasi apparently sobrang resource intensive pala niya. Kasi kailangan mo ng computer running, I think, 24/7 for it. Kasi kinakalculate niya talaga yung simulation ng urban development. So, kinontak ko yung isang landscape architecture professor siya sa US, sa Kentucky University. Tapos, nagkataon na LA din siya. So sabi ko, okay, sige, kontakin ko siya kasi LA siya, karamihan na nakikita kong papers, puro mga jog or mga geodetic, ganun. So, ayun, ang dami niyang binigay na resources. Tapos sinabi rin niya na mukhang hindi feasible yung gusto mo mangyari within this time frame. So, yun lang, additional tip lang din, humingi kayo ng advice sa mga nakakaalam. Malay mo kasi nakatulong talaga sila.
Yeah, that's true. It's important that you build network during this process. We have a specific question for Don. If the formula is applied for Rizal Monument in Rizal Park, will the Torre de Manila within the accessible visual pollution, will it be applicable and able to verify it?
All right. In Rizal Monument's case kasi, if you stand in front of Rizal Monument, the Torre de Manila is not that big in scale sa visual landscape. So I guess ma-identify siya as a disturbing element pero hindi niya hindi ganun ka-great yung effect niya sa visual pollution ng visual landscape on that point sa harap ng Rizal Monument. But I guess ma-identify siya as a visual pollutant if, let's say, i-test natin yung proximity, yung visual pollution ng viewpoints in proximity to the Torre de Manila. So, siguro in that approach, pwede natin ma-establish na pag lumalapit sa Torre de Manila, mas visually polluted. So, baka from there, pwede natin siyang i-tag as a visual pollutant.
All right. Thank you for that, Dom. Another question from our Zoom chat panel. Oh no, I believe that was the last question. All right. I guess we are down to our last question. In one sentence, what would you tell or recommend to a struggling students who are to journey with their mini thesis and who are currently working on their thesis? All of you may answer the question. What's that one small piece of advice that you would tell them?
Siguro ako muna. Ask for help. As in, very vital na we ask help from other professionals. Like ako, very statistical yung ginawa kong study. So, ayun, nag-consult talaga ako ng stat prof or nag-reach out ako, tapos yung sa surveying, nag-reach out ako sa ibang students dito. Ayun. So, ayun, ask for help kasi mahirap siyang gawin on your own talaga.
All right.
Actually, same lang po kasi ako kay Don. Kasi hindi mabubuo yung thesis ko kung hindi ako nagpa-consult sa ibang professor. Lalo na ito from America. So, mas marami siyang nabibigay na information. Lalo na kasi wala naman masyadong resources dito.
Ako na lang ba? Siguro same rin sa kanila. Tapos yung soft skill ng soft skill ng pagko-communicate. hindi lang rin kasi UP Universe or UP professors yung nakausap ko. Nakipag-usap rin ako sa mga government agencies such as yung Bureau of Soil and Water Management sa DENR. Tapos nakipag-usap rin ako sa Department of Agriculture and sa sa NAMRIA. Ito kasi yung tingin nila sa ating mga UP students. Napaka-entitled and medyo maere kapag nagre-request ng data. Lalo na ako, marami akong kailangan ng data sets. So, more on request talaga ako ng request. And kailangan mo ng soft skill na mapagkumbaba ka and gusto mong i-condition yung sarili mo rin na you are requesting. You are not demanding. So, kapag na-instill mo yung behavior na yon na nagre-request ka ng data, actually, mag-extend sila ng help. Kahit yung hindi mo nire-request na data, pero na-perceive nilang relevant sa study mo, ibibigay nila. Basta huwag ka lang entitled and mayabang. Tapos number 2, siguro sa thesis, ang masasabi ko, yung thesis kasi parang manifestation rin siya kung ano ginawa mo for the past 4-5 years mo sa design. I mean, kung ikaw yung student na palaging nagpe-present ng mga group plates mo, more or less, maganda, ang comparative advantage mo sa thesis is maganda yung presentation mo. Kung ikaw yung palaging taga 3D, taga CAD, edi magaling ka talaga sa mga construction drawings saka sa 3D models. Pero kung ikaw yung tao na umiikot doon sa kada group plate, this time ako magpe-present, this time naman ako yun naman yung magto 2D, 3D. Nagiging holistic yung growth mo and mas prepared ka sa thesis kapag ganun. Hindi ka lang nakafocus sa past 4 or 5 years mo sa pagpe-present. Meron kang experience sa lahat ng aspects ng pag-come up ng project ng thesis. So, hanggang maaga pa sana, i-try mo yung different roles. And yun, magpakumbaba ka. Yun lang yung advice ko sa kanila.
Okay. So,
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Joseph.
More on choosing your topic, like choose something that interests you or something close to your interest. I mean, like, as much as, syempre, bibigyan kayo ng site, ganito, hindi lahat, pero as much as possible, choose something na interested ka, kasi mini thesis to, tapos, syempre, gusto mo, siya na rin yung maging thesis topic mo. So, mas okay kung yung topic mo is something that you would want to really explore or parang kahit, syempre, thesis, nakakapagod, pero it's something na hindi mo susukuan, actually. So,
all right. Those are very interesting and insightful pieces of advice. So ask for help, build a network, develop your communication skills, manifest your experiences, and choose something that interests you. I hope our students were able to take down all these notes while we listen to your interesting presentations and as we progress during the question and answer session. To somehow give us the key highlights and wrap up our session today, may we call on Professor Aj Rossell. Prof. AJ.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So it really is a pleasure to watch the pinnacle project of our undergrads, where we witness the accumulated knowledge and deeper understand landscape and even related studies, and how these were actually formulated together to solve our local problems and be acknowledged also at an international level. Today, we've seen various topics and processes, like from quantifying landscape elements to integrating new principles to our design outputs, to identifying spatial queries and logical combinations to study various maps, and to knowing which data to gather to create our own systems and simulation models. So to represent the lab, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, our speakers, our professors, our viewers, where together we saw how far landscape architecture research could go, whether enhancing or even breaking through current knowledge. I hope our watchers were also able to take away the best tools and practices for data gathering, analysis, and actually how to present the information in an organized and engaging manner. And lastly, take to heart their advice coming from their own experiences. So we are looking forward to seeing more research works from our undergraduate students and a great career for our graduates. So thank you and good morning.